माननीय मनीष तिवारी जी।
धन्यवाद अध्यक्ष जी। Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to oppose the sustainable harnessing and advancement of nuclear energy for transforming India, alias the Shanti Bill 2025. This bill seeks to repeal two seminal legislations, Mr. Speaker, sir. The Atomic Energy Act of 1962 and the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damages Act 2010 and replace it with a new architecture. Since the Honourable Minister, in his introduction, chose to speak about the history of India's nuclear program, allow me to spend 5 minutes recapping as to how did we get to this point. It was India's first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who pioneered India's nuclear quest. On the 3rd of August 1948, he set up the Atomic Energy Commission, which was anchored by the legendary scientist, the late Dr. Homi Bhabha. On the 3rd of January 1954, it was the Nehru government which set up the Atomic Energy Establishment in Trombay. And on the 12th of January 1967, after the very tragic demise of late Dr. Homi Bhabha in a plane crash, AI 101 went into Mont Blanc, the mountain, on the 24th of January 1966. The Atomic Energy Establishment in Trombay was dedicated in his name and renamed as the Bhabha Atomic Research Center. India's nuclear program till about the late 60s or even the early 70s was a peaceful quest. But it was on the 18th of May 1974 that Prime Minister late Mrs. Indira Gandhi carried out the first peaceful nuclear explosion. The test was called the Smiling Buddha, and the Buddha did indeed smile. And it would be important here to recap that Bangladesh 1971, the peaceful nuclear explosion of 1974, and then the incorporation of Sikkim into India in 4 years, Mrs. Gandhi had changed the geopolitical map of South Asia and put India on the nuclear stage globally. However, when a nation takes bold steps, it comes with a consequence. And India's peaceful nuclear explosion came with the consequence that the P5 nations, those who had established the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1967, came together and formed the Nuclear Suppliers Group, but also called the London Club. And interestingly, these were about 14 countries which went across the Cold War divide, the East Bloc and the West Bloc. And the only objective of the Nuclear Suppliers Group or the London Club was to deny India access to nuclear technology. On the 11th and the 13th of May 1998, Prime Minister Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, late Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, carried out India's second series of nuclear tests, but the sanctions against India only tightened after that, despite the Jaswant Singh Strobe-Talbot dialogue, which went across a couple of continents at that point in time. Finally, it fell to a UPA government under the leadership of Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh to break that nuclear apartheid. And it was in the July of 2005 that the Indo-US nuclear deal was initiated. On the 18th of August 2008, the India-IAE Safeguards Agreement was signed. On the 6th of September 2008, India got a waiver from the Nuclear Suppliers Group, and we've not got that waiver after that till now. It has been over 17 years, and we've not got membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group. And finally, on the 10th of October 2008, the Indo-US Civil Nuclear Deal, also called the 123 Agreement, was signed. And ironically, while Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh's government was trying to break nuclear apartheid, जो परमाणु रंग भेद नीति थी, उसको जब तोड़ने का प्रयास किया जा रहा था, हमारे परम मित्र जो उस तरफ बैठे हैं, उन्होंने क्या किया? वो 23 जुलाई 2008 को उस सरकार के खिलाफ, जो भारत की परमाणु रंग भेद से जो पीड़ित था, उसको तोड़ने की कोशिश कर रहे थे, उनके खिलाफ इस सदन में अविश्वास प्रस्ताव लेके आए। It is important that you reflect on your own conduct. When the UPA government was trying to break India's nuclear isolation and nuclear apartheid, you brought a vote of no confidence against that government. It's another matter that no confidence motion was defeated 275 to 256 with 11 abstentions. Now let me, अरे इतिहास तुमको समझाना बहुत जरूरी है. History is very important because you people tried to derail India's nuclear program. You tried to derail India's nuclear program. You were an impediment in breaking India's nuclear apartheid. That's a history that you should not forget. That's a history you should not forget. You covered yourself with ignominy. आपने भारत का जो परमाणु ट्रैजेक्टरी थी उसको डिरेल करने की कोशिश की राजनीतिक कारणों से. अध्यक्ष जी,
प्लीज एड्रेस द चेयर.
इनको बिठाइए. लेट द हाउस बी इन ऑर्डर. लेट द हाउस बी इन ऑर्डर. लेट द हाउस बी इन ऑर्डर. सर, सच्चाई कड़वी होती है अध्यक्ष जी.
I will be giving opportunity to you to
अध्यक्ष
speak.
जी,
Let him complete.
सच्चाई कड़वी होती है. Now let me. Now, Mr. Chairperson, sir. अरे तो शुरुआत आ गई. अनुराग जी जरा बैठ जाइए. Now let me, Mr. Chairperson, sir, come to the merits of this bill. Now, government has brought the present bill to open up the civilian nuclear sector to private participation. Clause 3-1-C of the bill. There's speculation that government wants to bring in 49% to 100% foreign direct investment into the sector. What strikes me as very strange, Mr. Chairperson, sir, that a conglomerate which has built an empire on leased public assets announces its intent to enter the nuclear energy sector in late November 2025, and in December 2025 we have this bill. Is it a coincidence that the Adani group of companies announces its intent to participate in the civilian nuclear sector, and within a month we have this bill in the House? Is it a coincidence? I'm merely raising a question. I'm not imputing any motives. I am not insinuating anything. I am merely...
1 second, please. Honorable Minister, sir.
Mr. Chair, I'm not yielding. I'm not yielding. The minister can reply when he has to. No, I am not yielding. No, I am not yielding. No, I am not yielding.
The Honourable Speaker asked me to be brief and not to touch upon the salient features of the bill. Otherwise, I was going ahead with that. Now, nowhere in the bill has there been any intention, obviously or inadvertently, reflecting that this is meant to benefit a certain house. Now, this is an allegation which puts the entire house into, which puts the... which puts the entire House into disrepute. We are practicing the highest norms of democracy, and nowhere in the bill. So this is totally an unfounded and a politically motivated charge which has no reflection on the body of the bill.
आप बैठिएगा.
Mr. Chairperson, sir.
Honorable Minister has
Mr.
replied.
Chairperson, sir, I wasn't making any insinuation. I wasn't imputing any motives. I was just saying that is it just coincidental that this has happened?
Honorable MP, sir, you already mentioned it could be a
So
coincidence.
let me go further, Mr. Chairperson, sir. And let me come to, since this bill seeks to repeal the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damages Act 2010, let me also recap what happened in this House on the 25th of August 2010, since I had led the debate on that particular bill on that particular day in this very House. So on the 25th of August 2010, the then MOS Prime Minister's office, Mr. Jiten Singh's predecessor, Mr. Prithviraj Chavan, came before this House and he said, and I quote, and I'm quoting from the proceedings of the Lok Sabha, "Sir, I have come before this House and say with all humility that there is an unprecedented political consensus across the political stream, including the civil society or whatever people we could bring on board. There was a slight contention about a few items. We explained the logic of why we brought in some of the amendments, particularly the amendment to Clause 17. Now, what is this Clause 17? Specifically, Clause 17B, let me read it out for the perusal of this House. So, the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act 2010 said, and I'll read 17B, the operator of the nuclear installation, after paying compensation for nuclear damage in accordance with Section 6, shall have a right of recourse where B says the nuclear incident has resulted as a consequence of an act of supplier or his employee, which includes supply of equipment or material with patent or latent defects or substandard services. Now, this was a clause on which there was a consensus across the House, across all political parties, that this needs to be included. Now, let me contextualize it. Why was this important? Because the Department of Atomic Energy, which leads India's nuclear program, felt that if we are going to be going into a collaboration where foreign suppliers are going to come in, there needs to be a clause in the bills or a section in the Act whereby if there is a nuclear incident because of the design in the product which has been supplied, that nuclear supplier should be made liable. And this was supported by the then by the former External Affairs and Finance Minister of the BJP, who unfortunately had been expelled from the party in August 2009, came back on the 24th of June 2010, and this debate was happening in the August of 2008. And let me quote late Jaswant Singh Ji. So late Jaswant Singh Ji, while speaking on the bill, he says, it is really Clause 17B of the bill, dealing with the operator's right to recourse, or the right to recourse, which then became a bone in our throat. बोले वो हमारी गली में हड्डी फंस गई. You have worked overtime to remove that bone. So late Mr. Jaswant Singh, the left parties, every other section of this House was unanimous that suppliers' liability should form a part of the civil nuclear liability regime. And what do I find? what I find is that when you read clause 11 of the present bill, and the minister is here, if I'm making a mistake, I'm open to be corrected. But I did not find a single clause or a single word which says anything about supplier liability. The supplier liability has been completely removed. Now, God forbid, if a nuclear accident or a nuclear incident was to take place, and since we are going to be dependent upon foreign suppliers, especially when we are opening up the nuclear energy sector to private participation, we are going to allow foreign direct investment 49%, 51%, 76%, 100%. I do not know how much to come in. Then, under those circumstances, shouldn't the supplier be liable? If there is a defect in the product, in fact, it is going to indemnify your own domestic players about whom you made such a big noise a while ago. God forbid, if some incident was to take place. And so therefore it is very important. I know a large number of countries around the world have had reservations with regard to suppliers' liability, now going back 15 years. And I do not want to get into the business of naming countries or companies, but it is important to understand, and the minister must explain, how removing the supplier liability clause is actually going to help. In my humble estimation, it is going to harm India. Now let me move on to the next aspect, clause 70. Now the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board. There has been a lot of concern now going back many, many years, Mr. Chairperson, sir, that is the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board really autonomous? Or is it an extension of the Department of Atomic Energy? If we are opening up India's nuclear energy sector to private participation, what you require is an autonomous, independent regulator who can be a neutral umpire. Since there is no clarity in the bill about how independent or autonomous the regulator is, I would definitely want the minister to clarify with regard to this. Next, I come to clause 30, the liability clause. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, there have been a couple of big nuclear accidents. The 3 Mile Island accident on 28th March 1979, Chernobyl 26th April 1986, Fukushima 11th March 2011, and there is continuing concern over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear reactor in Ukraine, which is now under Russian control. So therefore, you know, when you talk about nuclear energy or you talk about a nuclear incident, the consequences can be absolutely alarming. Now, clause 13 limits the liability to 300 million SDR, special drawing rights, which is approximately about 410 million US dollars. Even in the case of the Bhopal gas tragedy, the compensation awarded was $470 million. And this I'm talking about 15 years back. Why is the government imposing these liability caps? In fact, the liability should be at least 10,000 crores, irrespective of whether a reactor is 3,600 megawatt or a reactor is 100 megawatt, because God forbid if a nuclear incident takes place, the damage either ways can be catastrophic. So I have not understood this concept of a graded liability, and I would be very happy to be enlightened by the minister on this. Now I come to clause 15.3 of the bill. Anurag ji, Shanti rakho. Shanti rakho. Shanti rakho. Shanti rakho. Shanti rakho. Now I come to clause 15.3 of the bill, Mr. Chairperson, sir. Now, it exempts government-owned nuclear installations from insurance cover. It says government-owned nuclear installations do not require insurance cover. I asked why. And if the answer of the government is going to be that government-owned nuclear installations have a sovereign cover, then that should be made a proviso in the bill. Yes. Then there should be a proviso in the bill that should say that the central government will assume liability in case of a nuclear incident installing any of the government's nuclear installations. That should be explicitly stated in the bill. Then let me come to clause 19A, clause 25, subclause 4, subclause B, disposal of radioactive waste. Now, Mr. Chairperson, sir, spent fuel, uranium and plutonium remains toxic for thousands and thousands of years. Most countries store this in the facility itself. Now, this bill, except mentioning this fact, does not provide a robust framework as to how radioactive waste needs to be dealt with. It cannot be a function of delegated legislation, left to rules and regulations. This is a very serious issue. There has to be a schedule to the bill which explains as to how radioactive waste should be dealt with. My penultimate 2 points, and I'm going to conclude, Mr. Chairperson, sir. Now, what this bill is doing, it is prioritizing uranium-based reactor technologies, which undermines the entire third stage of India's nuclear program, which is thorium-based, and also the molten salt technology, MSR reactors, which should have been the logical path or the logical corollary of India's nuclear trajectory. Now, when I looked at this bill, and I looked at it in great detail, the sense that I got that if this bill goes ahead in this present form, it will undermine India's energy independence, and it will also undermine India's commitment to its clean energy goals. So under those circumstances, with the greatest amount of humility and an absolute sense of profound responsibility, I would humbly like to demand, request, beseech the government that this bill is very important. Please send it to a joint parliamentary committee. And by the way, Mr. Chairperson, sir, since there was a paucity of time, I've only made the highway points, what we in law call the highway points. There is a lot of devil in the detail, which I have not even come to. And so therefore, this bill needs to be examined word by word, line by line, and only after that should this bill come back to this House. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Chairman, sir.
माननीय श्री